Welcome to my channel. It's Egwin here from Beyond Systems. Today we are going to be a table. All right, now next movement in this month's one movement per day movement series. For those of you who do not yet know, what we are doing currently is I share one exercise, one movement, one sort of perceptual exercise or training exercise per day for the whole month. And those exercises range from mobility to flexibility to perception coordination, proprioception, and also all kinds of sometimes links towards mental, emotional, psychological components through the body. All right. Without any further ado, let's just jump into today's exercise. And if you like what you see, please also subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay up to date. And on my channel, you also find the videos of the previous days, of course. What we are doing is a tabletop position. Very simple. Both knees are on the ground, the toes are pointing backwards, and both hands are also on the ground. We are really starting in a very neutral position with pretty much the thighs 90 degrees into the ground, the arms more or less underneath the shoulders, so really something like this. One more word of caution here. If you have any troubles with your wrists, then please just put something very small, like maybe a bag of handkerchiefs or something like that underneath the palm here, which then will elevate the palm just slightly and reduce the angle in the wrist, in the dorsiflexion of the wrist, which will obviously take a little bit of strain off your wrists, if that is an issue for you. If you do that, place it here, leave the thumb free. Don't place it all the way over here so that your thumb cannot maneuver. You want it just in the center here so that your thumb can still drop down comfortably. Also, personally, I like an active hand, but since we're working with very little pressure right now, that's not so big of a deal. Make sure that in this position, your spine is, to begin with, pretty much in neutral. And the first thing we are doing while being here, make sure that your knees are roughly hip-wide apart. First thing we are doing here, simply let the upper body drop all the way through your shoulders and then push the shoulder blades down into the ground. So release the shoulders and let the upper body sink all the way through the shoulder blades. This will move the shoulder blades closer together. Then push the arms down into the ground and move the inside edges of the shoulder blades further away from the spine. So it's up and down, up and down. This is just to get a little bit of a warm-up feeling in the shoulder girdle, up and down. You can also try if you can do this unilaterally. So just release one side of the body and then press the other one down into the ground. This is much more challenging already in terms of coordination. Can I release just one of my two shoulder joints and sort of keep the other one stable? This triggers already something strange in our brains, which is exactly what we want here. So, the next part of this exercise, you can play with this as long as you want. Just playing with, hang on, let me release. How do I release? What? Just one arm? What? How is that supposed to work? So just letting the body sink down on one side, but not on the other. Just simply playing with something like this can literally take you half an hour or maybe days to properly figure out. The next thing is we change between a round and arched back. So a typical cat-cow. Be gentle with this and also play with different possibilities. Rather than hanging in there totally, so relaxing down, which will then put a strain in the lumbar spine, really try to find this sweet spot between your hip joints and your hands that go down into the ground, and engage the muscles in your back to open the chest towards the ground. Come back to neutral. Include the cervical spine. Wiggle yourself out a little bit, and now engage the front part of the body, pushing the middle part of your back up in the air. Release back down again to neutral, and engage the back muscles. Come all the way to neutral. Engage the front and push out. Especially when you push out, notice that you can actively push the palms and the knees into the ground to help you facilitate this spiral or this spinal wave. Now what we do is we are rolling back and rounding the back. Now we shift our weight towards the front and slightly arch the back. We sink back and we round, also tilt the pelvis in a posterior pelvis tilt, so meaning as if you're trying to pour out water backwards of your pelvis. So you pull your pubic bone up towards your chest. Release. Sink slightly forward, engage your back muscles, and push out and over, slightly over the front of your hands. Come back to neutral. Round in the rear and extend in front. Come back to neutral. Wiggle it out a little bit. Now, let's see if we can do the opposite. So, arch when you sink towards the back, and round when you come to the front. Arch when you sit back, and round when you come forward. Observe how it feels to do those two polarities. There is a distinctly different feeling between simply opening the chest and closing the chest, so rounding and arching the back in a neutral arm and leg position, or doing it shifted with the weight back or forward, because it changes the whole fascial, the whole connective tissue game, and which muscles are engaged at what time, and support the position that you are in with your center of gravity. So pay attention. Let's do this one more time, all three variations, and try to pay attention to those subtleties, because this is the perceptual foundation for what's to come next. So one more time. Hands on the ground, knees down into the ground. Let's start rounding the back and arching the back. Rounding and arching. All right, neutral position. Now let's sink back, round the back, and sink forward, arch, Sit back round. And forward arch. Back to center. And now the exact opposite. So, arch when you sit back, center, round, and you push forward. Arch, sitting back, and round, going forward. There are so many different things in there that one can pay attention to. It will definitely completely bomb this video into next level. So simply with this exercise, we could easily spend a day or two just observing what's going on in terms of connective tissue into our arms, into our wrists, which can, again, teach you a lot about hand balances and stuff like that. So there is a huge potential here. However, that's not what we are going to work with just now. What we are going to work with is now we're going to try and do a wave in our spine. First, just in center, and then one that uses moving forward and backward as well. For this wave-like motion, all the experiences you just made are highly important, because you probably realized that when you try to round your back in a forward position, it's more the upper part of your body that goes into a rounded back shape. And when you sit back and you round your back, it's more the lower part of your spine that is actually going into this rounding, and less so the upper body. And all of those subtleties, they are important now because they already teach you one thing, which is that this in mechanics we call this the fulcrum of the movement moves. So where the maximum amount of change happens, this depends in this specific case on whether or not the weight is more in the front or more in the back, when we are not trying to force anything specific, at least. And that is exactly, this experience is what we are going to work with right now for the next step. Next step being the wave. So we are here in this neutral tabletop position. And we try to fluidly move through rounding and arching of the back. See, there is not yet a lot of sequential element to it. Now we, in this specific case today, we are going to add the sequential element with a weight shift from the rear towards the front, because that's the easier approach. If you want to challenge yourself more, you can try to do a body wave, so a sequential activation without a lot of movement back and forth in terms of weight shift back and forth, which is possible, but much more difficult. So we are taking one step in between that can get you closer to the idea of, okay, that's how I could activate my spine in order for it to create a wave-like motion. And that's the main focus for today. So from here, now we're gonna sink slightly back, let the spine hang a little bit through the arms. Now start to round the lumbar spine. Move your weight slightly forward.
The more you shift your weight forward, the more it's the thoracic spine that's round. Then drop the lumbar spine back down and come all the way back in an arched sense. Then start to round the lumbar spine again. And arch down. Round. And arch. And round. And arch. Round. And arch. Round. And arch. Now let's try it in the opposite direction. So coming out in front, rounding the chest, rolling all the way back, and then starting with the head to extend again. Up, round. Letting the roundness, the fulcrum, drop towards the hip, and then come back up again. If you make this movement a little bit bigger, like you can see, you can also bend your arms to facilitate a little bit more range of motion, which will make it more palpable, more understandable, because movement that you can do a little bit larger will help you to understand typically. Not in all cases. All right, great, perfect. Try to take it one step after the other to slowly build towards what I've been talking about here now. And there is one more component that I want to include here, and that is a total free flow, with the idea of building up a wave that flows out of the pelvic ring towards the front, and that then expresses either directly in a straight line or also slightly towards the side. So this movement will look like this. I'm going to show it from different perspectives. This movement then looks like this. See, and my arms start to soften. My shoulders start to soften. Now look at it from the front. I let waves run through my spine. Also allow for a side movement, for slight twists and turns. And what I'm looking for when I perform this movement is I want to feel where can I wave freely, and then especially in the shoulders and in the arms, where do I reach a point where suddenly it feels stiff or limited. And if I touch onto one of those points where, okay, I currently don't have a mechanical idea of how to smooth and how to soften this wave out in this specific area, that is the challenge for you to figure that out. There is a couple of additional pointers that I could give you
But for the sake of shortening this video and those just movement nuggets in this month, really let's stick with the idea of try to find that yourself. I always love to encourage people to go into this own exploration mode. And when we are here, when we are in this softening of structures, then find ways, understand how your arms connect into the body also when they do bear some weight. And that is an experience that the understanding that comes out of that experience is something that no one will ever be able to take away from you, much more. And this will help you much more to actually understand how you specifically work. And that is much more valuable than me saying, okay, now try to activate this muscle. Now do exactly this. Now try to change. That's possible, but it takes out part of the fun. All right. Have a beautiful time trying this out. Enjoy this flow and go into full-on experimental mode when it comes to those waves and to just letting those waves flow out of your pelvic ring. Start very slow. Maybe start with only a tiny little movement and then eventually try to make it a little bit bigger. This has a lot to do with your core, with your intercostal muscles, with the big back muscles, with the hip flexors, shoulder stabilizers. All of those muscles are fully engaged. There's hardly any muscle that is not engaged in this, and it's the whole connective tissue system that gets a workout. And that's a very important component for structure in those moves. All right, have a beautiful time. See you tomorrow, and all the best with this exercise. If you have questions, leave them in the comment box down below. Thanks for watching.